Donald Trump can make sure that his base doesn't fall apart, even though half of them are going, hey, man, are you a file or what? Like, what the going on with this Epstein? If he can withstand that while simultaneously sitting around and yapping it up, yucking it up with Benjamin Netanyahu, great Satan Yahoo himself, then he is truly Teflon. And I guess whoever, especially whoever is ambitious enough or bold enough to not give a shit about democracy at all and has enough charisma to maintain like enough of a loyalist fan base, will be able to do whatever the they want to do forever.
Well, Megan Hayes, there was some reporting prior to this meeting today that actually Trump was not that excited about meeting the Israeli prime minister.
Yeah, right.
And there has, to Elena's point, there's been CNN reporting and others
bud.
that the Trump administration and Trump himself were frustrated by foot-dragging by Netanyahu on the next phases.
Bro, Israel is so uniparty. I'm sorry. It is such a uniparty take. Oh, my God. It's so... Both sides will always suck Israel's dick in American mainstream news. So much so that they are unironically doing the same exact reporting that they did with Brandon. There's reports that Brandon is very upset with Netanyahu. He's going to punish him any day now by giving him, $20 billion in weapons again. And it's the same with Trump. He's going to humble Netanyahu. Yeah, someone in the chat said, yeah, of course he was upset with seeing Netanyahu. Nobody likes to see their boss, okay? Especially during the holiday season. Netanyahu's playing Trump as he played Biden. He says Israel won't move to the next phase of the ceasefire unless a stabilization force is created, but countries say they'll only participate if the Palestinian authorities involved. Knowing this, Israel blocks PA involvement. Oh, no. So things are just simply not going to work out, I guess. And Israel's going to continue occupying 50% of the Gaza Strip and then find eventually, when the attention is like moved away, they will find another reason to occupy the rest of the Gaza Strip and continue its ethnic cleansing campaign. It almost feels like they just want to ethnically cleanse the Palestinians from the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, Americans will get mad about this for like a day and a half, but then immediately move on to being like, what's really scary though? Muslim. Benjamin Netanyahu,
thank you,
international war criminal, is currently shaking hands with Donald Trump. They talked the entire morning.
I have to say that.
And they're live now.
In addition to what I said, that we've never had a friend, even close, a friend, as President Trump in the White House. I think he's been extraordinary in his friendship and his support for Israel. His principled positions.
I don't know if they're in the Mar-a-Lago. I think they're in the White House, no?
His willingness to
Or are they in
just
Mar-a-Lago? Oh, yeah, they're in Mar-a-Lago. They're in Florida. You're right.
Things, and I don't say that as a compliment. I just mean it. People have heard me say that behind your back, Mr. President, many times. But I want to say something else. I think we have a partnership, if I can quote you, second to none. I think it's allowed us to do enormous things. People said there was a different conception at one time, which means that America can advance its interest in the Middle East if it opens a lot of daylight between it and Israel. And President Trump has done the exact opposite. He's achieved remarkable things in the Middle East because we work together. We talk about our ideas. Sometimes we have different ideas, but we work it out. And most of the time we see eye to eye. But it's been a remarkable experience, and this was a very, very productive meeting. And may I say, a very good lunch. Thank you. Thank you for your friendship.
Thank you very much, baby.
And thank you for your support. It's meant from the heart.
Thank you. As I said outside, he's been a wartime prime minister, and we were, well, I guess I could say I was a wartime president in more places than just Israel, if you think about it. But Israel was a big factor, and we're
Don't
with
they
you.
secretly hate each other? None of that
And
matters,
we'll
brother. What are you
continue to
talking
be
about?
with you, and a lot of good things are happening.
You're watching.
in the Middle East.
You're
We have peace
watching
in the Middle
a
East,
double
and we're
dick
gonna try and
suck.
keep it that way. I think we will be very successful in keeping it that way. And you've been a great friend, and I've been a great friend to you and to Israel, and it's been my honor. And the award that I was given was really surprising and very much appreciated.
Well, President Trump has broken so many conventions to the surprise of people, and then they figure out, oh, well, maybe, he was right after all. So we decided to break a convention too, or create a new one, and that is to award the Israel Prize, which in almost our 80 years, we've never awarded it to a non-Israeli, and we're going to award it this year to President Trump. This was announced formally over lunch by our Minister of Education, who's responsible for the Israel Prize. It's going to be awarded to President Donald J. Trump for his tremendous contributions to Israel and the Jewish people. I think it's such a fitting thing, and it would honor us, obviously, Mr. President, if you could visit Israel in that occasion on our Independence Day. But I have to say that this reflects the overwhelming sentiment of Israelis across the spectrum. They appreciate what you've done to help Israel and to help our common battle against the terrorists and those who would destroy our civilization. So, again, that's an expression of thanks.
This isn't going to stop the spitting on non-Israelis? No.
Thank you, baby, very much. That really is a great honor. Any questions, please? We'll go pretty quickly because
I actually agree with them getting this prize 10,000%. This will be a stinking and never wash off.
Things are. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to know if you and the Prime Minister talked about having Israel pull back its troops before Hamas fully disarms. I know that's been an issue. Did you push for that today?
Well, we talked about Hamas and we talked about disarmament, and they're going to be given a very short period of time to disarm, and we'll see how that works out. Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner will be in charge of that from our side, but if they don't disarm as they agreed to do, they agreed to it, and then they'll be held to pay for them. And we don't want that. We're not looking for that. But they have to disarm within a fairly short period of time.
Is Israel withdrawing its forces?
Well, that's a separate subject. We'll talk about that.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Mr. President, did you have a message for the Prime Minister about the West Bank? And are you at all concerned that Israeli settler violence, could be undermining the peace plan?
Well, we have had a discussion, big discussion for a long time on the West Bank.
Oh, yeah. He gave him a stern talking to. They're going to stop any day now. The settlers are going to stop being ruthless.
We'll come to a conclusion on the West Bank.
If I could ask, what is the decision?
Remember,
Well, I don't wanna
every
do
single
that.
thing,
It'll
this
be
is, in many respects,
at an
not
appropriate
even
time.
remotely
He will
different
do
than the
the right thing. I know
Russia-Ukraine
that. I know him
conversation,
very well. He will
where
do the right thing.
there's
Yes.
no new development, right? Like, there's no real new development. He'll just say whatever the he needs to say to shut people the up. The reality of the matter is Israel does what Israel wants, and no one can
Well, I
actually
know
say anything
President
about it.
Erdogan very well, and as you all know, he's a very good friend of mine.
He'll just say
And,
like,
I
"Oh yeah,
believe
no, I'm
that,
gonna." I
and
talked
do
to him.
respect him,
I
and
talked to him real.
Bibi
He
respects
gave him
him.
a stern talking to. It doesn't
And
matter. None of it is.
They're
It's
not
all
gonna have
bullshit.
a problem. They're not going to have a problem. I know him very well, and you've seen me do things with President Erdogan and Turkey that nobody else could have done. We're not going to have a problem. He's done a fantastic job. I'm with him all the way. I'm with Bibi all the way. Nothing's going to happen.
Even like forcing Benjamin Netanyahu's hand to only annex half of Gaza and not the entirety of Gaza, which is what happened with this so-called peace process,
Well, I'm not concerned
was
with
actually a PR move, not necessarily a PR move to start making Israel look good again, right? Because they're not going to be able to do that. But it was basically a moment where the Trump administration had to be like, listen, guys, like, we're with you all the way, 100% of the way. But like, it's gotten to a point where like, you're going to lose everybody. You're going to lose everybody if you keep the death and destruction. At least you can keep killing people during the peace process, but like, it'll be sidelined. It won't be that big of a story if you just keep quietly assassinating people. And the mainstream media won't cover it as much. But then again, the whole point of the meeting today that's taking place is most likely to see how much more they can escalate conflict.
37-hour trip.
How much more they can escalate the conflict in Gaza, like how much more they can intensely bomb Gaza and like overtake the rest of the Gaza Strip, I suspect. But also beyond that, I think it's more so to just like go and nuke Iran out of orbit. Dead on analysis, but why did Hamas agree to it? Out of options.
President Herzog. Did you talk with him directly?
President Erdogan?
Herzog.
Out of options, and also too many civilians were slaughtered. They were running out of time. They were running out of hope. They were running out of options. They decided to stop the ethnic cleansing, knowing full well that there's no real like disarmament that's going to take place. Because like, what are they going to do? Take the small arms away from the Gaza Strip? They don't have like
You
They don't
wouldn't
have
Israel any
rocket.
longer.
They don't have
Israel
like
would not
actual
exist.
missile launchers and you know what I
Say
mean? You
two-
can't really like
two of them
disarm
would, and
this
8 of them
group.
wouldn't. You
Also, the
needed
other
a
Arab
very
countries
special
leaned
man
in and
to,
pushed in that direction as well, and Turkey
and
too.
really help Israel through this horrible jam. You know, these are major factions, and it started with our negotiation with Iran. I think it probably started with Soleimani. That was really where you mentioned that today, which started with Soleimani. Bad guy, doing bad things, hurting a lot of people, killing American soldiers and other soldiers. But it started right there, would probably be the starting point. And then from that point forward, but you have a wartime prime minister at the highest level. There could be other wartime prime ministers, but they'd lose. He won. And I think the people of Israel appreciate it. I think a lot of the people in the world appreciate it, actually. And because of that victory, we were able to get peace in the Middle East. If you had a different kind of a personality, if you had a weak person or a stupid person, and there are plenty of both of them, you would not have had success, and you might not have Israel. And you report for Israel. I know you're very proud of it, and you do a great job. You might not have a job because there might not be an Israel right now if you had a different prime minister.
Oh,
That's a big statement, but to me, it's a very simple statement to make. I'm looking at Pete Hegseth, and he's sort of nodding.
imagine.
If they
Oh,
don't
how
have a strong
terrible.
prime minister, Pete, you might not have Israel today. I think he'll go down in the record books. And, you know, I was a big help. I'll be honest with you, big help. Somebody said in the room, if you don't have Trump, you needed a proper combination of everything. And if you didn't have that combination, which they had, you would not have an existing Israel right now. And the people of Israel know it. That's why they like me, and it's why they actually like him. He's got a little bit of a love-hate more than I do over there. But you know what? Even the haters have a lot of respect for him. There's a lot of jealousy about him, a lot of jealousy.
Point of understanding regarding Syria.
We do have an understanding regarding Syria. Now, with Syria, you know, your new president, I respect him. He's a very strong guy, and that's what you need in Syria. You can't put a choir boy. You can't put somebody that's a perfect person. Everything's nice, no problems in life. You have the opposite there. He's a strong guy. We get along with him great. I can't ask for any more. He's been with us all the way. We had that mishap with ISIS, and he was with us all the way. He was fighting us. You know, he was fighting them. So I hope Israel. I'm sure that Israel and him will get along. I will try and make it so that they do get along. I think they will. Bibi, do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, well, our interest is to have a peaceful border with Syria. Our interest is to have, and we openly say it, we want to make sure that the border area right next to our border is safe. We don't have terrorists, we don't have attacks, and we also want to secure our Druze friends. And by the way, I think not only the Druze, but other minorities, especially the Christians, should be protected as well in Syria and throughout the Middle East and in Nigeria. In your efforts, we back completely because Christian communities are beleaguered around the world and especially in the Middle East, but in parts of Africa too.
Yeah, especially in the Middle East, like the Christian Palestinians, Bibi.
Don't forget, it was President Erdogan that helped very much get rid of a very bad ruler of Syria. That was President Erdogan. And he never wanted the credit for it, but he really gets a lot of credit. Bibi agrees with that. I agree with. I mean, I know it.
Yeah, notice that they
And,
just
President
never.
Erdogan should get a
Obviously,
lot of
there's
good
no
credit
safety and
for
security for
what
the
he did. He
Muslims.
got
That's not a
rid
thing.
of some very bad people, and you know they've been wanting to do that for 1,000 years with different names, but for 1,000 years in Syria, President Erdogan did it, and we give him a lot of credit. I give him a lot of credit.
The terms of the ceasefire agreement has failed to disarm Hezbollah, actually. In your view, should Israel strike the terrorist organization again?
Well, we're going to see about that. We'll see about it. The Lebanese government is at a little bit of a disadvantage, if you think of it, with Hezbollah. But Hezbollah has been behaving badly, so we'll see what happens.
Oh God!
And if you don't see Hamas disarm in that short amount of time that you're giving them, can you tell us what the
You
next
look like
steps
you have
would
mad
be?
hemorrhoids. What is that?
Horrible
What?
for
How?
them.
what is the specific
Horrible.
look to having a hemorrhoid?
It's going to be really, really bad for them. And I don't
I've
want
never
that to
heard that
happen.
one before. That's
But
a
they
new
made
one.
an agreement that they were going to disarm. And you couldn't blame Israel. By the way, we have other countries that will come in and do it. They said, let us do it for you if they don't. Countries that were with them wanted the deal to be made, agreed that they would disarm. And now if they say they're going to disarm, that's fine. If they say they're not going to disarm, those same countries will go and wipe them out. They don't even need Israel. You know, we have many countries, 59 countries that are in agreement. This is a real peace in the Middle East. And Hamas is a small part of it, but it's still a part of it. But we have 59 countries that signed on, big countries, countries that are outside of the Middle East, as you know the Middle East. They want to go in and wipe out Hamas. They don't want Israel. They don't need Israel. They want to do it because it's the right thing to do, because they were for the deal based on the fact that Hamas pledged, they swore that they were going to disarm. Now, if they're not going to disarm, those same countries will wipe out Hamas. Yeah.
President Trump, do you think that the PA should be involved in the day after in Gaza Strip, even in the near future? And the same question to Prime Minister Netanyahu. Do you see a real opportunity that the PA will be in Gaza?
Go ahead, Bibi.
I think President Trump put clearly the conditions of reform that he wants to see in the PA for them to be involved. And I think he put it very clearly what he wants to see, the kind of real reforms, not just perfunctory reforms, but real reforms. Stop pay to slay, change the curriculum in your textbooks, open up
Dog,
different
you need
society.
denazification. Israel needs the actual reforms. The are we talking about, man? Why is
And all of
U.S.
a
so
sudden,
public with
Iran had the
Israel?
whole Middle
Brother,
East
you know
all
what it's like?
But that's
You know
not
when you
true
have like
anymore.
a,
That's not true anymore.
let me think. Who's like a celebrity that's like a serial abuser, right? When you have like a celebrity that's like a serial abuser, that's like a really bad person, but then they still keep getting jobs and they still keep getting brought on, and then people inevitably just like lose sight of that. A lot of people are saying Chris Brown, sure, right? People keep putting him on. This is basically what the United States of America is doing with Israel, because the United States of America is putting its arms around Israel because it's the most dominant country on the planet. That's the reason why they keep openly posturing this way. That's the reason why they keep flexing their relationship over and over and over again. The reason why they're doing that is so that, you know, everybody else understands that Israel is under the protectorate of the United States of America. They can do whatever the they want. It doesn't matter if you don't like that they've done a genocide. It doesn't matter if you don't appreciate the way they conduct themselves. None of it matters, because the big dog in the room is attached at the hip to Israel. And that's precisely what's happening here. They don't care. They don't care about like, oh, the negative PR or whatever. They don't give a shit. It's America. What are you going to do?
But in the meantime, we're doing numbers that nobody's ever seen.
What are Americans going to do, right? It's not like we can do anything about it. What can we do about it as Americans? We have a lot of distaste for this. We have a lot of anger and resentment for this kind of thing. And yet, nothing changes.
He's doing a renovation of a
Like,
building.
everything that they're doing
He's up to 4.1
reads to me like they're just basically flexing the power that they have, the control that they have. I mean, think about it. The past
It's the
2
highest
weeks
price
of
in the
news
history of
coverage,
construction.
the past 2 weeks of news
Spending
coverage
more
revolved
money
around
on
Jeffrey
buildings
Epstein
than
and
this
Trump's
per square foot.
administration directly, Trump's DOJ directly defending co-conspirators, hiding their names. And it doesn't even matter. Like, we have a pedophile protectorate in the White House, and it doesn't matter. None of it matters. Nothing matters. He's stealing oil from countries that we've declared foreign adversaries, potentially seeking to invade random Latin American countries, right? None of it matters. The economy is dog shit, and it still doesn't matter. Everyone is so locked in on the slop that they're consuming, in the mere moments that they have to themselves, in the moments that they have to themselves where they're not actually worried about, you know, their financial troubles and making sure that they still have a roof over their heads or a hot meal in front of them. They're just invested in the slop. it's too difficult for people to just tune in to exactly who is ruining their lives, to figure out who's exactly ruining their lives, even if the people that are ruining their lives are doing it out in broad daylight, openly stating it, openly saying, what are you going to do about it? Now, I don't know if things will change. I think there could come a point where, at least if the economy is really bad, if it gets to a point where it's so bad that people are genuinely suffering, like Great Depression style, because we're not there yet. The wealth disparity leading up to the Great Depression was not as bad as the wealth disparity that exists now. Having said that, for the poorest Americans and for the middle-class Americans, they are not as they're not suffering as bad as they were during the Great Depression. And I think if they got there, if it got to that point, and it potentially could, then you would see some real revolts. And I don't know if those revolts would be directed at those in positions of power or directed at random people and groups, like minority groups that have no power whatsoever, but have been vilified endlessly by this administration and by the right wing propaganda over and over again. But basically, things are still nowhere near as bad. I think they're not bad enough, rather, for people to actually revolt and rise up. Here's a great example of this, right? Here's a great example of this. Donald Trump is a open fraudster, right? We know he is. We know he doesn't pay his taxes. We know he doesn't pay his contractors. We know that he is currently using the executive office to cut deals for himself, right? To the tune of billions of dollars, as a matter of fact. He's done cryptocurrency schemes. And yet a lot of people, even liberals, like, they get mad at that, but they don't get mad at that much. But the very same institutions that are also actively stealing money from Americans' pockets, people like Elon Musk that actually came to power, not elected, mind you, but appointed to a seat of power specifically to fire people at the federal government, are running around hyping up the narrative that, like, every Somali in America is actively robbing the welfare coffers blind, pointing to a real instance of corruption and a real instance of welfare fraud to drive home this narrative that actually it's not the wealthy guys you got to worry about, it's the Somalis. And Americans immediately lean into it.
President Trump, are you going to allow Turkish forces, and do you expect Turkish forces to be stationed in Gaza?
So I have a great relationship with President Erdogan, and we'll be talking about it. And if it's good, I think that's good. And a lot will be having to do with Bibi. We're going to be talking about that. But Turkey's been great, and he's been, excellent as far as I'm concerned. I don't know about you. To me, he's been very good.
Can you guarantee that?
Sure. Yes. Mr. President, can you tell me a little bit about your relationship with Prime Minister Netanyahu and how important it is?
Would you say Trump mogged here? No, he's not. He's not mogging. His mandible is recessed. Random thought. Do they not want Turkey and Gaza specifically because of NATO concerns? They seem fine with other U.S. allies being there. Oh, no. I think it's more so drama between the two different vassals. Israel and Turkey have drama. Specifically in Syria, where they both have different ambitions and different designs for what must take place in Syria. And I think there is already there's a lot of back and forth there. So that would heat up. That would reach a boiling point if the Turkish army was deployed to the Gaza Strip. And then obviously they're not going to fight against the Palestinians there. That's never going to happen, right? You have a higher likelihood of having the United Arab Emirates and the Saudi militaries actively fighting against Palestinian military or Palestinian militancy than you do with the Turkish army. Or maybe I'm wrong, I don't know, but I just don't think that would happen. So they would end up most likely being against Israel. Like there would be an inevitable conflict between a NATO military, the Turkish military, and Israel, for sure. And then that's a much larger crisis. Israel, Cyprus, and Greece signed a mid-sea defense pact. They keep crying about Turkey on Hebrew media. Yeah, no, there's a lot of conflict in the region between Turkey and Israel. And it's really interesting because they're both American servants. They both play a major role in advancing America's interests in the region. And yet, there's a lot of back and forth in terms of like who gets to be the top dog. And I think Israel will always win that argument, no matter what happens. They have divergent interests in Syria. I imagine that has a lot to do with it. I mean, their divergent interests are technically their divergent interests in Turkey. There's also a divergent interest in Somalia. I think that's another big one too, because Turkey has a lot of ties to the current Somali government, and Israel's recognition of Somaliland is a foothold for Israel to have at least some kind of control on the other side of the entry point into the Red Sea, against like a line of defense against Yemen and the Houthis. So like both Israel and Turkey are in line with America's goals in the region, and they play a very important role in advancing America's goals in the region. They're both anti-Iran, for example. There's never been a moment where like the Turkish military was like pro-Iran at all. They've always been anti-Iran, right? And obviously Israel has also always been anti-Iran. So they have the same exact interest in advancing America's interest in the region. They also have similar enemies in the region, but ultimately, I think they're just trying to be the number one lapdog for America, if that makes sense. And in that battle, Israel's always going to win out. Turkey will always get little broed. I mean, obviously, they have a much larger army, and they're trying to play a bigger role in Ukraine. And also, they have this almost neutral position on Russia as well. So they get to be a middleman between Russia and Ukraine in some ways. And I mean, Turkey played a major role in taking out Bashar al-Assad in Syria and gift wrapped Syria for America and Israel. And yet Israel has expanded further and further into Syria. Turkey's goals for Syria, of course, is to create a buffer zone in the northern Syrian corridor, where they can resettle the Syrian refugees, many of them of Sunni descent that escaped into Turkey. 10 million of them were housed in Turkey, which was obviously another opportunistic move from Erdogan. It wasn't like a humanitarian thing at all. He was doing that so he could have some kind of leverage over the European the EU nations, and he did use that aggressively. There's also the Rojava element here, where they do not want the Kurdish militias at all. They do not want there to be any sort of nation state development or any sort of autonomous zone developed in that area for the Kurds. And that's a major point of contention. HTS does not have any power to actually deal with the Kurds at all either. Or not HTS, sorry. Jolani / his new name is what? Ahmed Shara, or his old name is Ahmed Shara, whatever. Shara, Jolani, whatever you want to call him. Jolensky does not have any power and can't really do anything to satiate the appetite of the Turkish government in terms of giving them the buffer zone, right? That's like Syrian territory. Turkey also wants a unified Syrian state to prevent Kurdish autonomy in the northeast and use Syria as both a buffer zone and a subservient market like they used previous Idlib administered areas as. Yes. But they also, like I said, want to resettle a lot of the Syrian refugees that are still in Turkey into that buffer zone. And I don't think Israel wants that for some reason. I don't think Israel wants Turkey to have any sort of foothold in Syria. They just don't want Turkey to be a regional power in Syria at all. So they're pushing back and aggressively, doing Israel. Israel wants greater Israel. Israel's going to keep bombing Syria to achieve greater Israel. Yeah. The difference, of course, between Turkey and Israel is that Turkey does not have a APAC, right? At most, what Turkey has been able to do in terms of of intervening in American domestic affairs was Eric Adams, a low-level guy from, I think he was in Brooklyn as a council member, right? And then he lucked into the mayoral position, and then Turkey basically turned around and used that for small deals, and they offered him free Turkish Airlines flights and free hotels and like that. In exchange for that, Eric Adams gave Turkey what? An assurance that he would not recognize the Armenian genocide, and also fast-tracked their fire inspections. That's it. To understand how different of a playing field Turkey is playing against Israel in terms of like any sort of domestic lobbying front, they're not even on the same. They're not even on the same planet. Abi, I do not think Erdogan cares where Syrian people live. They are more likely to be interested in populating the Syrian areas with radical Islamist militants who depend on Turkey for legitimacy and are committed to creating an Islamic state more than anything. I don't think Israel's goals are in conflict with Erdogan. Well, they sure seem to be fighting over it. I think even if they're not in conflict with one another, Israel doesn't seem to think so, because they are definitely trying to. Maybe Israel thinks they can use the Kurdish nation state as like a separate power against Iran, because there's a lot of Kurdish militias that they use in Iran as well. And obviously the Kurds have been historically a partner to American intervention in the region, only to get dropped the moment that America's interest wanes, or the moment that they want to offer Turkey something as a gift. And I suspect that in an effort to continue using Kurds as an American proxy in Iran, they keep floating the idea of like an autonomous region in Rojava. And I suspect that Israel wants that too, because I do see a lot of like pro-Kurdish nationalist sentiment from Israel too. And obviously Turkey doesn't want that. Turkey doesn't want that at all. Turkey would only allow any sort of like autonomous region, in my opinion, if it was backed by a Kurdish leadership that is subservient to the Turkish state and their interests. And that's never going to happen, because any sort of Kurdish nation state that will be developed in the region will develop along the same boundaries as like Israel. That is the goal that Americans have, if at all. And the only thing stopping that from happening is Turkey refusing to let that happen. What do you make of the peace deal with the PKK? Oh, that was an American gift back to Erdogan, so he could win some domestic points, brownie points. It's not the same as Israel though, because Kurds are indigenous to the land, Lamau. No, I understand that. Of course, it's not the same as Israel. I'm just saying that the function of a Kurdish nation state, if it was ever allowed to be developed in the region, would play a similar role to Israel. It would operate like a proxy. And I think for the longest time, the reasons why America has never allowed that to happen is because it's more beneficial for America to just keep dangling them as like militias that can disband or organize, as they dangle nation statehood in front of them over and over again, and then just like sell them down the line, as the United States of America has been doing, far before this last version of the conflict, right? And that's it. Yeah, they use, they also dangle it against Turkey as a threat too, for sure. What makes you think America was beyond the Turkey-Kurdish rapprochement? I thought that was driven by the hardline conservative Turkish politician. No? Yeah, by Devlet Bahçeli, the leader of the MHP party, which is the ultra-nationalist party. The ultra-nationalist party was almost entirely crafted and supported by the CIA. And in its initial stages of development, it was utilized, not dissimilar to Gladio, against growing Kurdish nationalist movements that were aligning with the socialists. And it was far too close to, obviously, the USSR in proximity for America to not gain a stronger foothold over what eventually became a very valuable NATO partner, that has, missiles directly pointed at the USSR, or at the time directly pointed at the USSR. I don't know why my people are bitch-ass clowns. They keep being used like a fleshlight, then thrown out, absolutely useless. I don't know why Westerners treat us like we're some amazing group of people who are all socialists or libs. They don't realize we ruled by a bunch of militaristic mobs who coincidentally also work for the CIA, so the pro-Kurdish propaganda in the West is usually trying to advance their own interests rather than anything good for the region. Yeah, this is also true. But also the nationalistic, the ultra-nationalists were the ones who actually reached out and said Abdullah Öcalan, the jailed leader of the PKK, was willing to cut a deal to disarm Kurdish militias in the region. It's really interesting that it was the ultra nationalists that did that, right? They are the biggest ops of the Kurds in Turkey. They're the biggest ops of the Kurds in general, right? They're a part of the leadership coalition alongside Erdogan. So the very fact that he was the one who did this as the, handpicked, as this shadow says, handpicked Gladio agent. Devlet Bahçeli is literally a handpicked Gladio agent, so much so that Alparslan Türkeş, who offered himself to the embrace of NATO as a part of Gladio, called Bahçeli an agent. The ultranationalist movement in the country is directly aligned with the State Department. And Erdogan also comes from the other side of American State Department intervention. Him and Fethullah Gülen come from the same background, the Islamist movement in Turkey. And that was also another CIA operation in the country. And if you are wondering why there's so much CIA intervention and involvement in Turkey, well, it's a NATO country. And as I was describing to you, it was important to make sure that Turkey did not fall to the pesky socialists, to the scary socialists, and therefore they quickly ensured that the armed, straight up terrorist gang members that were the ultranationalists would dominate any kind of pro-Kurdish movement, any kind of socialist movement, any kind of trade unionist movement, which they did very successfully. And then from that point on, anyone that had any motion in Turkish politics was basically at most a liberal that presented themselves as a social democrat, not dissimilar to other European countries where similar things took place in Western Europe specifically.
For you to see him be pardoned by the Israeli president?
Look, he's a wartime prime minister. He's done a phenomenal job.
Yeah, MHP is still ultra-nationalist, but they're relatively moderate because the new version of that is Zafer, which is like the new Hitler youth. There are many Israel supporters among them. I know. They all came after me in the beginning. Yeah, there's also another meta that's even more ultra-nationalist than the ultra-nationalist party that has gained the attention of a lot of young people. It's like an online phenomena in the country. And those were the guys who were like so anti-Arab that, there's a lot of people in Turkey that are anti-Arab, let's be real. Part of that is because the Syrian refugees that came in were presented as like a move, an Islamist move by the Erdogan administration, as though he has any care or consideration for Muslims anywhere around the world. Let's really doesn't. But yeah, you called them dogs, Lamau. Yeah, I said they were dogs to America, and they got so mad. I mean, it's funny because they call me İngiliz uşağı, which means a servant of England, which is pretty funny. Abi hala onunla biliyorsun burada sıfır konteks, sıfır nuance. Evet, Turks still get sensitive about that. When I said you are a dog to America for being pro-Israel, this was right after October 7, and there were anti-Arab Turks in my chat, like nationalist Turks in my chat yelling at me. What were they saying? They were basically saying like, oh, if you love the Arabs so much, why don't you go fight in Palestine? Like that's the type of shit that they were saying.
One of us from Channel 12 News. What are your plans regarding Gaza for the next few weeks?
Well, we're going to be dealing on Gaza. That's why this very great prime minister is here right now. We're talking about Gaza. We're talking about a lot of things. We have about 5 major subjects that we're discussing, and Gaza will be one of those subjects.
Mr. President, can you guarantee that the last hostages and Philip will be released before we continue to the second phase of the Gaza plan?
Well, let's put it this way. Every hostage...
Trump is hype mogging him. That's true. He is actually hype maxing.
Just about that's been released was released because of me, Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, my whole team, Marco Rubio, Pete Hegseth. They were all released because of us. None were released in the Biden administration. None. They were all released because of us. Then we had a lack of releases with respect to the dead. And all of a sudden they started coming back because I said, nope, you said you were going to... We have one wonderful young man whose parents are right now inside. And he's, what beautiful parents, a beautiful brother, sister, and like a beautiful family, and they're waiting for their son. It's the only one left, and we're doing everything we can to get his body back. And the parents just said, hopefully he's alive. And I said, I love you to think that way. Okay?
President
so we're
Trump,
doing everything we can.
do you have President Trump? Does the record...
So I think this upcoming year is going to be a pretty big one because the Obama 10-year defense pact that was $30 billion is finally coming to an end with Israel. Because Obama, on his way out, if you guys recall, he's even though he was considered to be the most anti-Israel president, oh my God, he hates Jews. He hates Jews. Like, that's what they used to say in Israel all the time. And that's what a lot of people used to say about Obama for the crime of stepping out of line and actually doing the JCPOA, the Iran denuclearization agreement. On his way out, he dropped a cool 30 bill, right? Which is nothing, right? I mean, come on. It's anti-Semitic that it wasn't $60 billion. Let's be real. And it was a 10-year contract specifically to refill the Tamir interceptors for the Iron Dome defense. And it was a $30 billion contract over 10 years. Now, of course, those numbers seem marginal. They seem tiny in comparison to how much money Brandon and then Donald Trump has given to Israel since then. But that contract is coming to an end because 2026 is when it's going to end. So now Benjamin Netanyahu needs to demand a cool 60 bill this time. And I guess, is it in 2028? Oh, okay. I thought it was going to end in 2026 because I guess like it got implemented in 2028. Is that what it is? Or maybe I'm thinking of something different. It's going to get renewed. Are you kidding me? Yes, it will get. They will double up. What is a contract? Don't they gift it? Wait, the contract is basically allocating congressional funds. That's what it is. They might triple up. Think about it this way. We squeezed a cool $40 billion to Argentina just to bail out one of Scott Bessent's buddies, okay, who's still holding on to Argentinian debt and does not want the Argentinian country to default. Why the wouldn't we give Israel $100 billion? I feel like that's the most anti-Semitic thing I've ever heard. They got the flags mixed up. That's why Donald Trump gave Argentina $40 billion, because I was like, what is this, the Israeli flag? Is this the Israeli flag? Oh, it's my favorite flag. Give him $40 billion. That's also partially why it's so funny when people are just like, I can't believe the amount of fraud that's taking place. The amount of fraud that's taking place. Brother, once again, we're talking multiple billions with a B overnight being shipped off for the hopes and dreams of one guy, or to protect the financial investment of one fucking guy. And you're out here sweating the fucking small stuff. Not to say that like the charity fraud, Medicare fraud, or any number of different like versions of fraud that's taking place on U.S. soil, whether it's done by Somali people or whether it's done by white people, it doesn't matter. Whether it's done by Russian nationals, as though there's another case of fraud there too. Like, all of that should be prosecuted. I am in favor of social welfare. I'm in favor of having a strong welfare state, and therefore, of course, I want the fucking people who abuse that structure to be punished. Just so we understand. Having said that, though, if you have smoke for what you foresee or what you are seeing in front of you that's taking place in Minneapolis, you should have the same exact kind of smoke for the Trump administration. You should have the exact same kind of smoke, if not way more, for Elon Musk. These guys are robbing you blind every day of the week. And then they're basically turning your attention over to Somalia, and you're falling for it. You're like, oh, this is the worst thing I've ever seen. Why is nobody talking about it? Why is nobody covering it? Of course people are covering it. Wake up to the reality that there is a reason why they are making you laser focused on this instance of fraud. There's got to be a reason for it, right? Why is it that collectively all of the billionaires like Elon Musk, the entirety of Twitter, Fox News, overnight is like, oh, what about the Somali fraud? What about the Somali style fraud? What about the Somali style fraud? Yeah, okay, investigate and jail the motherfuckers who stole the money. 100%. And the irony, of course, is that investigation is already being conducted. That investigation has been in the works. That investigation started under the Brandonian Department of Justice, ironically enough. And there's still subsequent investigations taking place. What you are demanding in that situation is, ironically enough, something that has already taken place, but they're duping you into thinking that, no such investigation was taking place until some random YouTuber went over and demanded to see children at childcare facilities. You're distracted. It's impossible to organize in a situation like this. It's impossible to get you to recognize exactly what's going on. and no amount of, hey guys, this is totally fucked up. And I'm glad that there is an investigation that's active, and that Medicare fraud, Medicaid fraud, or any kind of charity fraud is completely unacceptable. And then, purchasing cars or whatever the is unacceptable. It's one of the worst things that you can do. You're literally stealing money from hungry children. But one must ask why you didn't hear about it to the same degree when Brett Favre did it. Where were the Republicans when Elon Musk is consistently? Where were the Republicans when Elon Musk was consistently demanding more and more money? All of these billionaires do it. All of these billionaires do it. This is not a deflection. This is not a distraction. I'm not saying take your attention away from the fraud that took place in Minneapolis. Luckily, as far as we understand, justice is being served in that regard. But just think for a second, who stands to benefit from this? When I'm hyper-focused on this, I'm locked in on this. You can't be this malleable. You cannot be this easily duped. But unfortunately, for a lot of people, they are this easily malleable, this easily duped, this easily distracted.